Welcome to another edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up. During this program, we will highlight the agenda items presented to the Lakeville City Council at their February 2nd, 2015 meeting. First highlighted item on the agenda is item number 5A, Community and Economic Development 2014 Annual Report. And to provide the background information on this agenda item is Community and Economic Development Director Dave Olson.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to give the highlights of last year's economic development activities in the city of Lakeville. It was certainly a good year. You should all have a hard copy in front of you now. And Laura, did you get one as well? Okay, good. And we'll just get started. We always start with some basic statistics, and primarily one of the key indicators is the total valuation of building permits issued by the city for the year. As you can see, in 2014 we did just over 144 million. That's down approximately 5 million from last year, but still up considerably from 2012. And I didn't go back further in that, but we'll see some other statistics that go back a little bit further on some of these other numbers. And we always try and segregate, and the key indicator of the, one of the indicators of the economic growth in the city is the commercial industrial building permit valuation. And you can see that we were almost 13.8 million in 2014, and that's up about 2.7 million from last year, and even a little bit more than that from 2012. 2011, there was a little bit of a spike. That was the year we issued Walmart, new Walmart store permit. So. And you'll see that more so on the commercial industrial. One or two big projects can really skew the numbers sometimes on commercial. But then you go back to 2010. Obviously, there was much less activity, and I think in 08 and 09 would probably be similar numbers if we were to pull those up. Residential, we track a number of different types of statistics for residential development, and the one that we use, and you'll see some comparison to other cities in the metro in just a second, but 348 residential permits. And just to refresh your permit, every new single-family home, every new townhome unit constitutes a permit. So, and in Lakeville, just as it has been the last couple of years, the majority of that 348 permits were single-family homes. All but about 32 of those were single-family home permits. So. Down slightly from 13, both in terms of the total units. We were down about 50, and in single-family permits, just for single-family homes, we were down about 15% from 2013. However, those numbers were still, in terms of permits, and again, we'll just make this distinction, permits, and this is the number that was numbers that were reported by the Builders Association of the Twin Cities. And I think I've said this qualifier before. Their numbers differ slightly from ours. My only, the way I've been able to ascertain where they get their numbers is their reporting periods are slightly different. They release their numbers before December 31st. We were still issuing permits on December 31st, so we had a couple more. There's a difference of about 19 units in what we reported and what they did, but you can see that Lakeville, even using the BATSI numbers, which are a little bit lower than our numbers, were highest in the metro in terms of number of permits, followed by some of the similar cities that we usually see in Plymouth. And Plymouth has actually seen a resurgence. Blaine and Woodbury and Maple Grove came in third, fourth, and fifth. Here's where it gets into units, and again, a unit, and I just described what a permit constitutes, but another single permit, a 60, 70 unit apartment building, for example, is one permit. And so Maple Grove and Savage, for example, both had some apartment developments in their communities last year, and so while their total permits weren't as high as Lakeville, their total number of units were, and I also, in the footnote at the bottom, we don't include Minneapolis in that calculation because, and if you can read the fine print, they're at 2,312 units, and that is because of the high level of apartment development that's still going on in that city and continues to and has for a number of years. But so good year in terms of comparison to the metro. Some cities are seeing a resurgence just as we are. But fortunately for the last 2 years, Lakeville was the highest in terms of permits for residential units. We also try and track it out by school district. Everybody knows Lakeville's comprised of 3 school districts, and you can see the breakout. There are not a lot of active subdivisions in the portion of Lakeville that are in 192, which is Farmington. 194, Lakeville School District had the majority of about 2/3, or not quite 2/3. And then ISD 196 numbers are up considerably from where they were a number of years ago, and that's primarily to the Spirited Branch and Farm and Tullamore and a couple developments over in the northeast part of the city. This is kind of how it maps out. Again, every little red square is a residential permit, and you can see the light green is the majority of the western 2/3 of the city. That's ISD 194. You go up into the bluish purplish color up in the northeast is 196, so you can see quite a bit of red showing up there, and then 192 in the kind of mauvish pinkish color, and that's a one subdivision off of 179th Street that's been active obviously last year and for a number of years. That's a new Hyvee Homes that took over the development of that. And Mr. Morey and his staff were busy in 2014 reviewing new single-family plats. Total number of final platted lots in 2014 were 429, which is up about 10%, not quite 10% from last year. 397, 348. You can see when things picked up again, basically in the last 3 years, the residential activity, platting activity, and it's been predominantly single-family, almost exclusively, but this is what the numbers have been for the last 5 years, and you can see obviously what it was during the housing downturn during the recession. It was quite a bit lower than it is the last 3 years. And this is the part that my department's more actively involved with, and that's on the business development, business growth side. Menasha Packaging was a project that we started working on early in 2014, and they had a 120,000 square foot of their existing manufacturing facility down in Air Lake. This was on a nice summer day when we had the groundbreaking, and a couple, Mayor and Councilmember LeBeau were there, and we had the Commissioner of Department of Employment and Economic Development and a couple of representatives of Menasha, and they're creating 15 new jobs and retaining 221 jobs out there. And I'm also pleased to say that we issued the certificate of occupancy for this project on December 31st. So APRO Development got the building up and closed and completed in a real timely fashion. And the other project, and we'll be talking a little bit about that with one final remaining action by the city on tonight's agenda, but BTD Manufacturing and the expansion that they're doing of the Fulford Group warehouse off of Cedar Avenue. And the slide shows a smaller 13 or 14,000 square foot addition that was done kind of in the center of the existing building, the Fulford warehouse building. This is creating additional office space for BTD, but the large expansion on the east end of the building will be commenced this spring, and it's going to be a total between those two additions of 200,000 square feet expansion of this facility, and it will be a building over 500,000 square feet when it's done, and they will be creating 100 new jobs and retaining 215 jobs. So, great project, two great projects, and in my opinion, they're excellent examples of economic development. And they were both obviously projects that the City Council approved tax increment financing for, and they're manufacturing jobs with livable wage, head of household type jobs with great benefits and long-term employees. And so two great companies, and decided to grow their business in Lakeville. A little footnote here, the Council approved and the EDC recommended in our 2014-2016 strategic plan that existing, as a goal, have existing businesses expand by 500,000 square feet over that 3-year period. Happy to say that we're 2/3 of the way there in the first year on that benchmark or that goal, and also added a goal of adding 300 jobs, and we're a little over 1/3 of the way there on that after the first year, and that's just for these two projects. Some other business growth that occurred, Dick's Sanitation, after having owned and leased out the old drywall supply building, started up a new business operation within their company called Recycle Minnesota, and they do a full-blown recycling operation there, and A couple of us have had the opportunity to tour that facility this summer, early fall. It's impressive. The building looks the same on the outside, but I can tell you it doesn't look the same on the inside anymore. They've made a huge investment in state-of-the-art recycling, separating equipment and machinery, and created 25 new jobs as part of that. NPL, another project, existing business that used to be out on Kenrick Avenue off on the west side of Lake Marion, is building a new office warehouse building along County Road 70 just to the east of the building on the top. So it's along 70. We just, the picture of the footings got poured late in the year, last year, and I'm sure the building will be completed later this summer, and it is a company that has 85 jobs in Lakeville. They are a pipeline construction company, so they travel all over doing natural gas pipeline construction projects, but quietly, and have kind of existed and operated in Lakeville for quite a few years, and have obviously decided to stay here as well. A couple new projects. FedEx Freight, Council gave preliminary plat approval to that this fall. It's a new 95,000 square foot freight facility that's going to be built in Lakeville at the corner of Dodd and County Road 70 with 125 new jobs. We're working on finalizing the final plat on that. That'll probably be on Council's next agenda, and they also are looking to get underway this spring. And then another project that Mr. Maury's staff and Council approved last year, and that's the Hyvee grocery store to be located up on Pilot Knob and County Road 46. Kind of ironic, almost identical size projects, but obviously quite different type projects. This will be a retail grocery store, including gas convenience and automatic car wash. Some other internal growth in terms of going into existing facilities. This is a ribbon cutting the chamber held out at Park Dental. They're in the shopping center off of County Road 50 and 175th Street this summer. Title boxing went into the shopping center up on Cedar and County Road 46, the Lakeville Crossing. El Parian Mexican restaurant went into Crossroads and the former El Patio space, and Kaleidoscope is a new retail store that opened in downtown Lakeville this last year. A couple new commercial buildings that were completed and opened last year. Ballet Royale off of Kenrick up there by Sterling Bank up in northwest part of Lakeville, and then a new Super America gas convenience store down at County Road 70. And Keokuk, and it's interesting when we took this picture when the store just opened, the gas prices have fortunately changed a little bit. Maybe not fortunate for Super America, but it's kind of funny what the prices have done since then. We've also been trying to track over the last few years employment statistics for Lakeville. This shows from January of last year to the end in December. We just got the December numbers last week. Rick Howden and in my office put this information together, but you can see, and especially the bottom two lines, Lakeville really follows the county in terms of unemployment rates. We started the year at a 4.8 in the city compared to 4.9 in the county, and finished the year at 3.1 and 3.2% unemployment rate in Lakeville. Here's the five, again, we go back a little longer. Here's what the trends have done the last 5 years and gone from 6.2 down to 3.1% unemployment in Lakeville. And that's obviously all going in the right direction. Each year I kind of get asked, well, how many jobs have we added in the city? Now, unemployment pertains to Lakeville residents. This graph is portraying what the businesses in Lakeville employ, which obviously a good number of them, these jobs are not necessarily held by Lakeville residents, but we ended the year, this is the second quarter of 2014. They're always a couple quarters behind on these numbers where we get them from the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, but finished just under 16,000 jobs. That was in the second quarter last year, which from 2013 at the same time was about 500 more in terms of the number of jobs, but you can see where it was from 2009, which is probably the bottom of the recession. It's, over 2,500 jobs have been added back into Lakeville since then. So good indicators, and hopefully that continues. Redevelopment projects. This is a project that I spent several years of my career here working on. It finally came to fruition last year when everything aligned in terms of funding and ownerships, and we were able to complete the downtown parking lot project, which is the center downtown behind what we call, and the downtown guide plan calls the Ben Franklin block, and it's the center portion of the upper left photo there that is city-owned and was totally reconstructed, including adding drainage improvements behind the existing businesses off of Holyoke, and completely removed all the existing pavement, which had kind of seen its better day, and repaved the lot and added landscaping and lighting. And we were fortunate enough to add to that project at the last end of the grant cycle anyway. We included the Holyoke Avenue parking lot next to the Art Center, and that was not a total reconstruct, but just to remove and improve the streetscape along Holyoke and try and improve the aesthetics of that lot, and actually restriped it in the process and picked up about 12 or 15 additional stalls, I think. So great projects that were funded entirely by funds from the Dakota County CDA. Close to $600,000 to do all of the acquisition, design, and construction of both of these projects. Council might remember this. Some of the council members, a couple years ago, council created a housing improvement area for the Niagara Village townhomes off of Flagstaff, just south of County Road 46. And what that was, these are owner-occupied or townhomes that the association was responsible for the exterior maintenance of these townhomes, and these townhomes were 30 years old, and the exterior, the units were starting to show it. It was quite difficult, if not impossible, for that homeowners association to find financing to replace the siding and windows on a lot of the units, siding on all the units, for 52 units, I think, in 13 buildings. And the city was working with the Dakota County CDA. The council approved a couple years ago the creation of a housing improvement area. But the CDA had always intended to finance it, and then in the 2013 legislative session, the CDA got authority to actually do both portions, to create the housing improvement area and do the financing. So we basically handed off the project to them. It made more sense, and just this last fall, you can see the pictures on the right, they got all 52 units upgraded before the end of the year, and hopefully added some longevity to that townhouse development by making those improvements. Real quickly, part of our activities this last year include manufacturers tours that were held the week before Manufacturers Week, and to the left of the list of all the businesses that were able to be visited last year. And I want to say a thanks to the Chamber of Commerce, who partnered with the city to schedule and participate in all of these visits, and we'll be making more visits. Again, this is Mr. Roche and I think both concurred that, and others, that this was a good idea, and it was well received, and we're going to continue this practice, not only just in the fall prior to Manufacturers Week, but really make an emphasis and a push. And a lot of these businesses obviously participated in the Manufacturers Week as well. Some of our other marketing initiatives were part of the State of Minnesota Open to Business program. We just mentioned the manufacturers event. My staff and I attend as many MinCar and Minnesota Real Estate Journal and other type of events where we can, when we can get information out on Lakeville as a place to grow and expand businesses. And just finally, these are the priorities we operate under, and as I alluded to earlier, we're seeing some progress in meeting some of the goals and having things occur in the priorities that were identified in the current strategic plan. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 5B, Public Works Department Monthly Report. And to give the background information on this agenda item is Public Works Director Chris Petrie.
First, we'll talk about pothole repairs. It is getting into that season again, and I think everyone is well aware of the struggles we had last year in our community and all over, at least the state of Minnesota, with the extreme cold and frost depths that we saw throughout the state. Seemed to produce some of the largest potholes in recent memory. This winter, however, we've seen a fluctuation in temperatures. It hasn't been as cold. We don't have as much frost. And that's helped, and the result is fewer potholes that we've seen out in our system. However, it is providing a perfect setting, of course, for them to develop as the rest of the winter continues and we move into spring. Of course, the key in appearance and growth of potholes is the moisture that gets under the asphalt and then thaws and freezes, creating a void under the asphalt. As pavement flexes under traffic, it eventually breaks down and leaves a pothole. So our streets division crews, as you can see in these photos, have been out repairing potholes throughout the city the last couple of weeks. And the best way, of course, to combat the formation of potholes is to keep the road surface sealed, as our staff is doing by patching the potholes so that moisture cannot get below the surface and into the subgrade of the road. Also, as council is aware and everyone listening, we've been fortunate to miss this winter, at least from a snowfall total. So in the event that our staff is not out plowing snow or performing snow and ice control, at the top of their list is our Boulevard tree trimming, which we complete every winter. Trees are best trimmed in the winter months when they're dormant. Trimming, of course, is done to remove any diseased or dead branches. And along roadways, of course, it's to allow the safe passage of vehicles, improve sight lines, and improve the growth and overall health of the tree. You can see our crews in the photos. They're using a combination of pole saws and chainsaws to cut away branches and limbs. Then once the branches are trimmed, you can also see the photos on the right of our crews following up behind the tree trimmers and chipping all the brush as they go. Wood chips are then stored until they accumulate, stored at our central maintenance facility until they accumulate to such amount that district energy comes and utilizes the chips and recycles the chips for energy use in St. Paul. Chlorine gas is an important part of our water treatment process here at the city, and the photos you see are at our water treatment facility. Chlorine gas is used to aid in the removal of iron through our iron and manganese removal plant. It also is used, which most folks are familiar with, as a disinfectant to eliminate bacteria and other harmful microorganisms in the water. Of course, chlorine is the most commonly used method to eliminate these disease-causing microorganisms in water. Both federal and state governments require that public water supplies be biologically safe. So, for the amount of water produced and the amount of chlorine that's required to treat that water, the Utilities Division has specific requirements in place related to the handling procedures for this chemical and the containers for which it is delivered. One of the safety measures, which many people aren't familiar with, is we have this device, and that's a chlorine scrubber, which in the event of a chlorine leak or a release of the gas, it's automatically activated to absorb and neutralize the gas and discharge clean air into the atmosphere. Recently, though, you can see by the photo, at least at the bottom, our scrubber developed a small leak, which automatically, developed a small leak through a crack in the base of the tank. Our utility staff is currently working with a contractor to repair the crack and reinforce that scrubber tank very soon. And lastly, I already mentioned the low snowfall totals for the season. However, that does not mean that the plows do not need repairs. As the council is aware and others, we have still been out performing at least snow and ice control when we get these little blurps of snow or freezing rain. And recently, one of our trucks that was out here on a weekend in January developed a problem with its axle. You can see some of the repairs on the axle occurring in the upper left photo. However, while our technicians were completing that repair, they also noticed that some of the bolts holding our wing plow frame, which the wing of the truck, you can see that in the bottom right-hand slide, had some issues and were missing and needed to be repaired. You can see that by the photo on the bottom with the cutting torch, which was one of our fleet technicians. And then in the kind of middle right photo, you can see him working with the wing post to realign it. These repairs are representative of some of the types of repairs caused by the hard use that these vehicles see throughout the winter months. And that does conclude the monthly report for January 2015.
Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 7, public hearing to consider a business subsidy under the Business Subsidy Act for Fulford Group LLC and BTD Manufacturing Incorporated. And once again, to provide the background information on this agenda item is Community and Economic Development Director Dave Olson.
Good evening again. I'll try and make this one a little bit shorter than the last presentation, but council's familiar with this project, and I just touched on it in the annual report, but Fulford Group is owners of the Fulford Group warehouse, in which BTD is a major tenant and one of 2 tenants in the building. They've been working together to have plans, and there's representatives, Paul Gittner of BTD is here in the audience tonight. But they've been working collaboratively to come up with plans for a major expansion of the existing facilities located at 21350 Cedar Avenue in the Air Lake Industrial Park. And as a result of the considerable growth that BTD is experiencing, they are proposing this major expansion, again, of nearly 200,000 square feet. As part of the project, the application was made last fall for tax increment financing assistance, and there's approximately $4.3 million in TIF-eligible site development improvement costs and site acquisition costs for this expansion. So, based on the plans that are being proposed and have been reviewed by Dakota County, and Council held and approved the tax increment financing district for this project back in October of 2014. Again, some of the more detailed specifics on the project. BTD has been a company that's operated in Lakeville since 2005. Currently have 215 employees in 3 different locations in the Air Lake Industrial Park. The expansion is expected to have the value of the property after the expansion, based on the county assessor, is going to range between $12.6 and $14.1 million. The ability to do tax increment financing only allows us to capture the increased value as a result of the expansion. The existing building that's there, approximately 300,000 square feet, the taxes from that portion of the property will continue to go to the local taxing jurisdictions, including the city and the county and the school district, and any special taxing jurisdictions, of which I think we might have one in the audience tonight. So everything that we're proposing to do in terms of assistance is based on that additional expansion. The total taxes to be generated by the 9-year of captured increment allowed under an economic development district is just over $1 million, $1,077,000. And that's proposed to be provided to the company on what's called a pay-as-you-go approach, which means every year after this county collects the tax revenue, forwards to the city the portion of it that's eligible to be captured as tax increment, we in turn make a payment to the company based on 95% of that tax increment. And the TIF plan and the development contract are using the estimates that were provided based on the valuation that was provided by the county assessor's office based on the plans. The requirements in order for a BTD to stay in good standing to continue to receive these payments is that, number one, they create the 100 additional new jobs within the first 2 years of from the date of the approval of this agreement. And obviously they also build the building, the 199,000 square foot of total expansion as proposed. And there's a provision where they have to continue to maintain their operations in Lakeville for a minimum of 5 years from the date of the approval of this assistance. Inability to do any of those that will result in the assistance being reduced or prorated based on what percentage of the compliance of the agreement that they've achieved. But we, along with the company, are confident that all these goals and requirements of the agreement will be met. So what's before the council is the actual contract that memorializes those requirements. We worked with the city attorney's office to review it. BTD and Fulford have both reviewed and approved and signed the agreement that is included in your packet. EDC reviewed this agreement at their meeting last week on January 27th and recommended approval. So with that, staff recommends approval of the contract for private development with Fulford Group LLC and BTD Manufacturing, Inc. as proposed.
Item number 7 was approved by the Lakeville City Council. Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 8, Aragon Senior Housing. And to give the background information on this agenda item is City Planner Daryl Morey.
Mayor and council members, as always, Ms. Gill does a very nice job with her presentation, so there isn't a whole lot that I have to add. But I will bring up a couple of things related to the process and the applications that are before you this evening. On the screen, I show the overhead of the site location. It is in the Argonne village commercial development. It sits just to the east and behind what used to be Rainbow Foods, now Cub Foods, and the inline retail center, and across the street from Wendy's and a number of other retail establishments in that area. The property is, as you heard, is a 3.22 acre parcel. It's currently zoned OR, Office Residential Transition District. And it was initially the application that was before the Planning Commission for consideration in November was for the preliminary plat of the one lot, and then also a conditional use permit to allow a senior apartment project in the OR district. As part of that proposal and part of the discussion, there is a smaller, hard to see on this photo, but a smaller 0.33 acre parcel that was just to the east that is separated by an outlot owned by the city. The CDA was going to purchase that from United Properties as well and include it in their density calculations for the site to achieve the 62 units that they are proposing, which would meet the density requirements of a high-density project that is allowed under the OR district. The Planning Commission had some discussion on that. There was some feedback from neighboring residents, and the Planning Commission in November tabled action on the preliminary plat and directed the CDA to pursue a rezoning to PUD, planned unit development. They felt that that was a more appropriate way to go for this proposal, and to not include the separate outlot as part of their density calculation and ownership. So what the PUD rezoning will do is allow the 62 units at a density of just over 19 units per acre, where the standard multifamily density of the ordinance would allow only 56 units at just over 17 units an acre. So the PUD allows the additional 6 units and the density that's proposed this evening. As an aside, I will note that Mr. Olson spoke with the representative of United Properties earlier, and they have indicated a willingness to deed that separate outlot to the city, and that can then it'll be at least contiguous with the city's outlot that has a wetland and ponding area to under one ownership, public ownership by the city. So that issue will resolve itself. Ms. Gill mentioned the parking, underground parking and surface parking spaces. I will also point out with this proposed development that there is 2 access points onto Janelle Path. The northerly or main access point, especially for the public access to the site, would be across from the entrance into the Argonne Village Center off of Janelle. And then the southerly access would be for the underground parking spaces at the southeast end of the building. What you see on the screen right now is a revised landscape plan that the CDA has prepared. This is following the Planning Commission, the second public hearing that was held on January 8th, and is in response to comments from neighboring property owners to the north and to the east. They have added additional plantings, more specifically coniferous plantings in locations along the north side adjacent to the proposed ponding area, and also to the north and east of the site, again to provide for screening of the back of the building and the driveway access point to the underground parking spaces. And this is something that the Planning Commission recommended, and again addresses some comments that were raised by neighboring property owners. Again, the Planning Commission public hearing on January 8th, the Planning Commission recommended unanimously approval of the preliminary plat and PUD zoning, and the Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources Committee also has recommended approval of the preliminary plat. Because of the CDA's time frame for construction of this project being in spring/summer of 2016, by our ordinance, preliminary plats are typically valid for a period of 12 months. They can be extended at the applicant's request. But since the CDA knows in advance that their time frame will need additional timing for the preliminary plat to be valid, they're requesting an 18-month approval, which will then fit in with their final plat coming in the winter, spring of 2016, with construction spring, summer of 2016. So staff is recommending approval of the Argonne Senior Housing preliminary plat, valid for 18 months, and the ordinance rezoning the property to PUD, and adoption of the findings of fact as presented. And I can stand for questions.
Item number 8 was approved by the Lakeville City Council. Well, those were the highlighted items presented to the council at their February 2nd, 2015 meeting. If you have any questions or comments regarding these agenda items, please feel free to call City Hall. The number is 952-985-4400. Thanks for watching this edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up.